This podcast is brought to you by Knowledge Wharton.
And we welcome in Steve Odland, who is the president and CEO of the Conference Board. He's also former chairman and CEO of Office Depot and AutoZone. And first, I say thank you for the invitation to come here. This has been a fantastic event to be a part of.
Well, it's great to have you, and we have people from all over the world. I think we counted something like 15 different countries coming together at our FutureReady conference, trying to figure out where the puck is going, to use hockey vernacular.
Well, if you can, then what was, do you think, the backstory of why the Conference Board thought doing a conference like this was so important?
Well, we've been around for 107 years. We are known for the Consumer Confidence Index, leading economic indicators. We do this work all over the world. And what we want to do is to say, where are things going in the future? The things that are so important for business leaders today is not only what happened in the past, but where are things going? And so we called this the Future Ready Conference, and we've made every panel, every interaction about not trying to be a futurist kind of pie in the sky thing, but what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, because every business leader is focused on that.
What does Future Ready mean for you and for the Conference Board specifically? Because as you just said, you're providing a lot of data and information to organizations around the United States and around the world.
Well, so we're sitting in a situation where you've got all sorts of geopolitical tensions, of course, but lots of interesting trade tensions, interesting with, in quotes, of course, and we've got frenemies today, friends, enemies between countries, and lots of different economic situations. We're booming here in the U.S. The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index is at multi-decade highs, but yet CEO confidence is actually declining. So you have a mismatch that we've never seen before. All of these interesting indices around the world, they're pointing to a slowdown. What are we going to do with that? How are we going to stimulate? So all of these things are coming together, and we can talk about any of these things, of course, but all of these things are coming together in our conference and trying to figure out where are things going.
So when you talk to other CEOs, and obviously I mentioned your roles at Office Depot and AutoZone, what are the areas that they are looking at as either positives or negatives looking 5 years out?
Well, I think this trade situation has rattled the CEOs, and I really do believe that that's the reason that CEO confidence right now is lagging a little bit. To a person, the CEOs say, we have to deal with this situation with China. We want to trade with them. We want them to be a great partner, but they are not following WTO rules. They are not respecting our intellectual property. They are stealing it for their own use. And of course, if you're China, you look at this and you say, we should be the world's largest economy. We have 1.3 billion people. Yeah. We want to grow faster, and the only way to do it is to adapt, quote unquote, adapt IP from other places. Yes. So you can see how this tension is there from their standpoint, from our standpoint. So we have to settle this. But I think everybody's nervous about how it's being done.
Well, one of the key words I think being used here involves investment. And I think that's a big question for a lot of companies right now, especially surrounding the concerns on trade at this moment, is how much does a company invest right now, knowing that potentially these trade issues could play out several more months?
How much and where? And that's a unique situation that we haven't seen in many, many decades. So when a company is making a capital decision, these are 20-year, 30-year kinds of decisions, and so any kind of inconsistency out there or lack of confidence is diminishes that kind of investment. So people hold back. And then what do you do with the cash? Well, you either buy back stock with it, you dividend it, but you're not making investments for the future when there's this uncertainty. And so part of what we need to do from a policy perspective in this country, also the EU, also from a Brexit standpoint, also from a Chinese standpoint, the major economies of the world need to provide some clarity for the business community.
Do you believe that we could be getting there at some point, maybe in the next 18 months or so? Because there are obviously a lot of factors to play. You mentioned Brexit, which, even though it's been going on for 3 years, I think a lot of people believe that it will hopefully come to an end at some point in the next year. I think there's a belief that there will be some sort of normalcy or at least easing of what we see here in the United States once we get past the presidential election coming up next November. And I guess maybe the only part of it that still is a lot of question is what's going to happen with China.
Well, you just mentioned the presidential election, which is what we refer to in Washington as silly season, and so you cannot divorce what's going on from that backstop, right? So you have a lot of economists out there who are saying, "Oh, a recession is imminent," and so forth, and you have to then stand back and say, where are their what are they making a political statement or an economic statement?
Right.
The Conference Board has always been highly nonpartisan. We look at things from a fact-based perspective.
Right.
We do not see a recession on the horizon. What we see is a slowing. But psychology is a big part of this.
Sure.
And so what can happen is if economists are out there saying, we want a recession, we're going to have a recession, and they're trying to throw an election, well, you can create one from and this is what I think is happening with CEO confidence. That slows down investment, and you've got this weird situation.
So is a potential solution to the trade dispute between the U.S. and China maybe the one thing right now that could change some of that mindset? Yes,
and the administration understands that. I met last week in a small meeting with Trade Representative Lighthizer. We had people on both sides of the aisle there. I think that the objectives are consistent across both sides of the aisle. We want to deal with the IP situation. We want fair trade. We want all participants to follow WTO. And our prediction at the Conference Board is that there will be some sort of minor deal that will, defuse the situation, let a little pressure off, allow both sides to save face. And, that is a really important thing. It is important in Chinese culture to allow leadership to save face. And so as we do that, we know that, and we've got to, our administration knows that, the negotiators understand that. So we've got to find some sort of deal that allows the pressure to come off. It doesn't necessarily lead to the big solution that everybody would love, but I think it would be welcomed.
Steve Odland is the president and CEO of the Conference Board, joining us here on Knowledge Wharton on Sirius XM 132. In terms of the conference, one of the things that is discussed a lot, I think, by companies and CEOs is technology and the impact that technology is going to have. Your organization, I'm sure, is feeling it to a degree as well with the use of different technologies in terms of collecting data and disseminating it to companies as well. How does that element play into both your organization, but also what you're hearing from people at this conference as well?
Well, the Conference Board has 5 centers, a human capital center, an economy center, ESG center, environmental social governance, marketing and communications, and policy. And we've brought all those centers together. In every discussion we've had across all of these centers, AI, technology, the future of how we deal with data, that has been part of this conversation. It's been very interesting to see. I think that this is going to be the next wave, all right? And so everybody says, oh, AI, but what does that mean? And what it means is we're sitting in a knowledge economy today where IP is at the core of that. Manufacturing is diminished to just at less than 11% of our economy here. Right. And so this whole use of technology, not only from the hardware perspective, but more importantly from a software perspective and an information and a data perspective, I think is going to really launch labor efficiency and dynamics.
Well, and I've heard a couple people here at the conference already say that while those manufacturing numbers have come down, obviously, in the last decade or so, is that you have the opportunity to build out a kind of a different type of manufacturing that's more localized that can be just as beneficial as maybe what we saw 40 or 50 years ago.
Well, exactly right. And not only that, if you have a global supply chain where it's much cheaper to manufacture elsewhere, and you've got regulations about environmentals and so forth here, you want the knowledge economy to develop. You want people to be using, not just their hands, but their brains. And, that's what we're about as humanity. So this is really a good thing. And it's the natural way from a hunter-gatherer to an agrarian to a manufacturing to this is it, right? Yeah. And so we can't just, it's not about buggy whips anymore. And we're about a knowledge economy.
How much of these types of conversations, going back in your career, but how much of these types of conversations were occurring when you were at Office Depot and when you were at AutoZone as well, thinking and probably knowing that these elements were going to be coming down the road as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I've been in business nearly 40 years, and I remember doing generation studies back in the early 80s and how these boomers, these new upstarts were going to change the world, and they were going to demand, more work-life balance, and they were going to demand more remote work, and the whole thing was going to change. Here we are nearly 40 years later, we're having discussions about Gen Z, the millennial generation, saying the same thing. This generation is so different. But I was smiling yesterday listening to it. It's really about the generational change, the life cycle of people, rather than a true difference between generations.
So even though we have the generations, coming to pass, it sounds like your expectation is that there are some core components in what our economy is and what our lifestyle is that are never going to change. They are going to be the same from generation to generation.
Everything's going to change, but it changes very slowly. It evolves. And so, the millennials 5 years ago were saying, 5 years from now, today, nobody will be driving an automobile in this country. It's all going to be these pods are going to be running around and so forth. I haven't seen one yet. Dan, have you seen one running through Philadelphia?
I have not yet, no.
Yeah. So, this is the thing. So we have technology, we have the capability, but these things take a very long time to really get through. So it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same, which is the great thing about our culture, but yet, the efficiency, the growth, and all of these things. I'm really an optimist about our future. And so, we've got problems, but, we're in a great situation.
So then what does that mean for you talk about economic growth, but what does that mean for the expectation that a lot of people have of economic growth? They want to see, obviously the conversation is 3.5% GDP. That is obviously, I think, in many cases, unrealistic. It's possible, but maybe we don't know if it's sustainable over a 5 to 10 year period.
Well, the major difference between where we are today and the periods of time when we've had that kind of growth is labor productivity. And, without sounding like an economist, that just means that you're getting more output for a labor hour. So we're producing more per person. That is possible with technology and all of the things that are sitting in the pipeline here today. So that can pick up. The point, though, coming back to your point, consumer confidence is at a multi-decade high. Our consumers are 70% of the economy. And remember, government spending is about a little over 20% of it. Yeah. So it's mainly a consumer-driven society today. And they are spending, they are optimistic, and that is driven by their jobs, by wages, which are in great shape. So, this notion that we're going to go off a cliff in a recession would require a black swan event that would have all consumers seize up. And you can't forecast it by definition. So I think the consumer is the optimist here.
So then what do you see as the keys of trying to keep that steady economic growth moving forward?
Well, first of all, it's psychology, right? So if you have every CEO pulling back on investment, stopping hiring, and doing things like this because there's this great fear out there, it can create certainly a slowdown, if not a recession. But we have seen, even through this period of time, the August automobile numbers. So automobiles are sort of the canary in the coal mine because it's a big purchase and people will ratchet that back. It's not like food where you have to buy food every week to survive. The showrooms were packed in August, and there wasn't anything unique going on. The July retail numbers were off the charts. So you're seeing this period of time where the consumer spending is still happening. Right. There's still great euphoria there, and that's going to pull our economy through.
And at least some of the early estimates are that the holiday season coming up is going to be a fairly strong one as well.
It should be very strong. All the orders, as an ex-retailer, all the orders were placed last spring. The shipments were on the water in the summertime. So, whatever tariff situation, it's not going to impact this holiday season.
I was going to say, how has that, do you think, impacted retailers or, to a degree now, but maybe if this continues for another few months, how will companies be impacted by some of these issues of shipping and getting product here?
Yeah, that's not going to affect this holiday season at all. Okay. It's next holiday season, if any. And so therefore, if we can get some sort of deal that brings a little confidence back into the business community between now and then next year is going to be great. But this year it's settled. And you have to realize that the whole, e-commerce situation is driving it. Amazon is 50% of the e-commerce. Yeah. They are driving pricing. It's making every retailer sharper in terms of mix, in terms of inventory, in terms of pricing, in terms of newness and innovation. It's driving it, and you need a catalyst. We had Walmart for a long time playing that role, and then Target, but certainly Amazon is doing it today.
But I think a lot of people would wonder, because of the success that Amazon has had, is whether or not there is a way to maybe not necessarily replicate exactly what Amazon is doing, but have companies that are kind of following that path to be able to develop that type of growth like Amazon is seeing, so you truly have competition for Amazon.
Exactly correct. And the companies that are doing that best are the Walmarts of the world, with their acquisition of Jet and Bonobos and others. And they are, in ModCloth, they're bringing together these capabilities, and their e-commerce business is growing even faster than Amazon's. Now, they have a long way to go, but they have a benefit that Amazon doesn't have, which is the bricks and mortar delivery, the sort of click and pick up type of thing. So you're seeing these models being transformed before us. Consumers love it. They're responding really well. And this is the kind of productive innovation that our country has always been about.
Steve Odland is the president and CEO of the Conference Board, joining me here on the show. So for a second, talk about, though, the reverse of what we're seeing, like Walmart obviously expanding into e-commerce, but we're starting to see some of the e-commerce companies kind of flip the script a little bit and want to have bricks and mortar stores.
Well, it is funny because, Amazon was pure e-commerce. You didn't want anything to do with bricks and mortar. But then you saw Walmart say, well, we have all this bricks and mortar. We've got to get into e-commerce. How do we make this unique? And so they started doing the bricks and clicks, as it's called now. And Amazon said, well, hey, that's working so well. Now we need to get into it. So Amazon has 3 different prototypes going in their model stores, which are no people. It's all electronic, and you walk past. The pricing is there. You're charged. They've got that model going. Yep. They've acquired Whole Foods, and they're doing the pickups. You've got Amazon lockers going on. Now they have their whole delivery system. This is, you talk about innovation, and I know we think about innovation of, in terms of, the manufacturing and so forth, but the innovation that's going on in this whole arena has never been seen before. And it's quite exciting in the retail world.
It is kind of a unique time, and the word revolution has been used by many people, that we are in a next revolution right now. You agree with that?
Well, in terms of retailing, of course, and you see these cycles come and go. Sears was actually the first internet retailer. If you think about it, before the internet, there was it was called a catalog, a mail order catalog. This was in the 1800s, and they were shipping trainloads of houses, prefabricated houses that people were assembling in the farmland. This was brilliant innovation. And if you think about what's done today, we're just doing what Sears did, over 100 years ago, but we're doing it through a different means. Instead of a paper catalog, we're using a digital catalog instead. Yeah. But this is a revolution, and it's a very exciting one.
We just need to make sure that we don't have the problems that Sears are having now moving forward.
Well, they didn't innovate. They got stuck in a model, and they said, okay, we're going to continue to replicate. But so that when you see the dynamism of an Amazon and a Walmart continuing to change, not just getting stuck in the rut, that's what gives you great hope.
Steve, great meeting you. Thank you for inviting us, and look forward to talking to you again.
Great to have you here at the Conference Board's conference.
Thank you. Steve Odland, President and CEO of the Conference Board.
For more insight from Knowledge at Wharton, please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu.